Myself, I'm Dr. Prasanna. I head the CSE department at SRM Vadapalli. I would like to have a small introduction about yourself. And we would like to record this video because I'm going to submit this as an assignment to Cambridge University, wherein we are doing an educational leadership program. The college is sponsoring us to do that course. So can I have a brief introduction, please?
Yeah, thank you. I am Dr. Raj Ramachandran, a lecturer in computer science, University of Bristol. University of West of England, Bristol, or UWE Bristol, and I teach software engineering. And my area of research interests around speech to text, user acceptance, requirements engineering. In terms of leadership experience, I do lead modules. I have been in an external and interview panels. I have also got experience in recruiting interns and coaching them, and also mentoring new member of staff. So I think that's my overall introduction.
Yeah, I have also gone through the website, or your website, where I've seen that you have done many certification in educational leadership, and most of your papers are also on educational leadership. Can you just brief about those topics, please?
Well, one of the things is the papers always come from the practice, and I also, in that context, I am a fellow of UK Higher Education Academy, and I hold PG Cert in Teaching and Learning qualification. A lot of the paper outputs actually come from what I'm doing, and I focus on experiential pedagogy. What I call as an unconventional way of teaching is I use Pancake as an example to take the students through the process of software development life cycle. So we're exploring concepts like teaching as students as academic partners, and involving students in the holistic process of students leading the lectorials or lectures, and then we are just there to support them, to guide them when they're delivering. So I think I'm trying to remove the concept of the right versus wrong and provide a free space for everyone to make mistakes and learn from them. So the lectorial is the place for students to actually make mistakes and learn from it. So it's a very open, I'm trying to have a very open environment where critical thinking is encouraged and students are able to put forward any views that they think is important in the context of what we are doing. I think one of the papers that I'm currently exploring is student as academic partners, the effectiveness of students as academic partners, bringing down the barriers. Not us versus them, but we are one of them, sort of the narrative, and also encouraging students to take lead in delivering sessions, for example. I've also tried to make the curriculum, or I'm trying actually to make it more diverse, not just in terms of the languages, but also in terms of examples. So typically my session would always start with music or a cultural element to do with the cultural element, and then it kind of goes on, but it all has a relevance to what I'm going to be teaching. So it's software engineering, but there will be I'll be talking about food and kitchen. I'll be talking about cultural artifact from different parts of the world. Obviously, to some extent, tailoring it to the demographic of the learners that I have in my session.
So can you elaborate on some of the teaching pedagogies that you follow in class? Software engineering is very kind of a theoretical subject.
Yes.
Make it more interesting.
Yes, and that's why I said I am more of an experiential, and I take social constructivist approach. So that's my method. That's my style, I should say. So I think I'll probably give you an example of how I probably do software engineering lectorial. So like I said, it starts with a music, with a song, or with a dance, or whatever, and that is there to sort of make the learners feel more comfortable. So they might be coming into my lecture and all of a sudden they'll be dancing, or there are dances going on, or there's music being played, and they'll be wondering, well, am I in the right lecture? And I said, yes, you are in software engineering, group software development. And then they fail to see the relevance. Okay, what's the point? Why are you doing this? And sometimes it's nothing to do with the academics, it's nothing to do with the actual teaching, but it's just to create an ambience, it's just to create an environment to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel settled. And I remember I wanted to see what impact it has when I don't do that. And in my feedback I received that I noticed that you did not play the music or dance for a couple of sessions. I was really looking forward to those. And that suggested me that some of the learners are really stressed, and that sort of songs or dance or anything that's going on there sort of lightens the environment. So from that perspective, I think they do appreciate. So getting back to the pedagogy of experiential learning, so I take an example of a pancake. It is an example, so it's pancake is a very, it can be anything. It can be an English pancake, it can be American pancake, or it can be dosa, for example, or whatever that may be. So I have an image of what a pancake might look like in my head, and I formed them into groups, and I said, well, okay, I want you to make a pancake. And groups work together, and they say, and I give them some conditions, and I say, well, I'm actually in Bali or in Chennai, and the temperature here is 35 degrees Celsius. I'm really hungry. I'd like a pancake, and within 15 minutes, I'd like your group to work towards the feasibility of it, and at the same time, I want to see how the pancake looks like in the end. So I want to see some image, and they can even Google search and show me the image. So they do that, and they make all the assumptions, and what I do is I just put in a word over there, look, I'm around, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me at any point. So they carry on doing that, and I don't interfere, I don't say what you're doing, or I don't ask every now and then. And after the time's up, I go to the groups and I ask, what have you done? And they come up with a pancake, and they say, well, this is the pancake that we came up with. Some of the groups also say, well, would you like a maple syrup on it, or would you like any strawberries on top of your pancake? And I have those in my head, okay, as a pancake image. And then I say to everyone that, well, actually, nobody's right or wrong. You all have a product in the end. You all have gone through a process. You all have a product. You are not right. I'm not going to say you're right or wrong, but all I'm going to say is the product that you have in the end does not meet my requirement. And that's when they start thinking, okay, he wanted a pancake. We made a pancake. Why does he not want it now? And then I go with the rationale as to, look, from a software engineering perspective, look, I'm the stakeholder and client. I was available to answer any questions. You have to ask that question to me, and you have to gather requirements from me rather than me giving you requirements. So this is just one example of experiential learning. So they actually experience the process, and in the process they realize how to do and what not to do, because they've already gone through the process, rather than theoretically telling them that, okay, in requirements elicitation, what you do is you engage with the stakeholder and you gather requirements and then you prioritize. So in a lot of feedback, I think, I've also had feedback from students 6 months after they've graduated. They say, well, actually, you know what, I've used your pancake example to sort of revisit the software development life cycle. I think it's been very effective in terms of learning from a student's perspective as well.
Probably they use extreme programming instead of SDLC.
Yeah, I think we don't focus too much on programming, but we focused much on the process. So I think from a software engineering perspective, I'd probably say 80-20, so 80% on process and 20% or 15% on programming. So I think that's the approach we tend to take, or I tend to take.
So you are an Indian,
Yeah.
settled abroad. Now you know Indian education system as well. So from your speech, I understand that you make the students dance and sing in class, whereas in India we don't have such practices. Maybe at least in most of the places we don't encourage the students to be so free in the classroom environment. So how do you feel that we can also implement such kinds of a free practices in our learning system?
Absolutely. I think the more freedom you give to the learners, they enjoy. Um, and I think enjoyment and de-stressing them is important for effective learning. I think that's really important because students come with a mind frame that, okay, so what's next, what's on the agenda today, what's he going to be all about? And when there is a different activity, completely switches on. And I think you do get very good responses, and you do get an active involvement from the students. And I think it may not be dance or music, but I think anything that could potentially draw students' attention or involvement would be a welcome move. I mean, the only thing the reason why I could think dance is because I would probably, we did that in this run. I did that, so I played one of the instrumental music, which is very local to Chennai, beats. I mean, so, and I asked them, okay, this is the beat. I'm going to repeat it for 2 or 3 times, and you've got to come up with your steps. So what I'm talking there is I'm talking transferable skills. I'm talking, there's no right or wrong, again. I'm talking ability to work with each other, ability to work in a group, ability to work to a time, because I'm only going to give them 5 minutes to come up with everything. And I'm going to play it only twice, so attentiveness. So it's not just, yes, it is enjoyment, yes, it is something very different, but it is also coming with a lot of passive learning, and then you can draw upon those in the lectorial. So I always draw upon these examples in my lectorial. So I said, look, when you did the dance, you all came together. You all did it really well. And you all did it on time. And I think that's what you need to bring into. So I think the relationship between what they have done, even though it's really, really quick, it is really effective because they're able to experience exactly what I'm trying to get out of them. So I think that, yes, I think if you are able to do that or sort of de-stress the environment, that would have a positive learning experience to the students, and that's what I've seen as well. Typically, my lectorial is a 4-hour lectorial, and students wonder, oh my God, what am I going to do for 4 hours? But
It's
when
4
they
hours
attend,
per week, is it?
4 hours per day.
Oh my.
So it's a one single session for us.
For the same set of students.
Same
Just
set
for
of
4
students.
hours.
Yeah, start at 2 o'clock, finish at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
On the same day, with probably a 30-minute break. And the kind of response I've had from learners is mind-boggling. I'm known to exceed the allocated timetable hours, not because I want to do it, but because of the engagement with the students. I think my worst record is probably 6 hours with the same set of students.
Okay.
So I think it's encouraging. It may not be good from a time perspective, but I think what I'm trying to draw the attention here is it is positive to generate that kind of an interest and enthusiasm from students who are ready to go beyond the allocated timetable. And as a lecturer, I'm ready to go beyond the allocated time frame as well.
So the teacher evaluation system, you said your feedback was very good when you handled a class of this kind. So is there any other mechanism that the London and UK universities follow for teacher evaluation?
I think we have a module level evaluation that sort of covers the module teaching team. And there's also something that's called as NSS, which is done more centrally. We have no control over it. And there's also university feedback mechanism. So I think I personally follow the module. What matters to me, yes, about the NSS, and I think and NSS and what we do in our classroom are kind of closely linked because it's all links to the student learning experience. And I think the more positive learning experience they get, I think it's holistic, not focusing on one aspect of it. holistic as in the lecture delivery, the style, the feedback, the overall campus experience, etc. So all of these sort of form a part of the feedback mechanism. In addition to the module feedback, I think we can add and edit questions. So I always add a few questions to know how well or not I'm doing in that. So for example, one of the things that I have tried and tested is my unconventional teaching. So I asked them to comment on students' academic partners. I asked them to comment on the approach on ITAKE. So I think mostly they were positive. And it is also an indication, it's also a point for me to reflect on. Sometimes it's not the comment or the feedback itself. I have to reflect at that point. I reflect at that point and validate the feedback. What are they saying? Why are they saying this? And is this really the case? Now, if there is any merit in that, I will take it and I will improve it and I will address it. And if there is not, then there is still potential learning there, because I get to know that they didn't understand what I'm trying to do. So there may be a communication gap there. So it's still a learning curve for me, because I've learned that what I'm doing is maybe perceived slightly differently by the learners, but there's still a scope for addressing that.
Was there any criticism? If yes, how did you handle it? In the feedback given by the students?
Okay. I think the only criticism, or one of the few criticisms that I got, was more to do with the module than to do with me as a person. But there was some feedback on the relationship between Pancake and the software development life cycle process. I think some learners were finding it difficult to relate, but I realized why that is the case, and I've worked on it to make it more accessible. So I think it's to do with more explanations on it, and be very slow and precise in explaining how this actually maps to the software development life cycle. I think I didn't do that in the past, but when that feedback came in, I reflected and I said, okay, maybe if I just do it when they are going through the exercise, that might help, and I think that helped a bit. But actually, they really enjoyed the dance and singing, because I think it is a very different experience. It's a very different way of thinking, particularly within the teaching learning environment, because they wouldn't expect in a software engineering lecture to be dancing and singing, and the relevance of it. So for example, software product is intangible. We can't feel, we can't touch it. And the reason why I take musical notes, why I ask them to sing, is because to be able to sing, or the notes or the musical notes is intangible. We can't touch or feel, but then we still somehow try to produce it. So just for them to understand the intangibility nature of software product and the complexity involved in it, I get them to experience that in the form of music. So voice doesn't matter, professionalism doesn't matter. I don't expect anyone to be professional singers. Voice doesn't matter at all. It's just the experience of producing an identical note and the complexities involved in it, mapping that to a software engineering, nature of software engineering product.
So as a teacher, you'll be having your own vision,
yeah,
and your school will also have a different vision. So how do you map your vision to the institution's vision?
I think it's already aligned in some respect. So areas like inclusivity, diversity, and I'm already doing that in my teaching. Internationalization of curriculum and partnerships, collaborations, collaborative effort, and simulating real life experience into the modules, which I'm already doing in the software engineering modules. So I think it'd be fair to say that they aren't very different. In fact, they are very, very similar. So my vision sort of complements the department's or the faculty's vision.
So how do you encourage your co-faculty development, like your co-employees development?
You mean my colleagues?
Yeah, your colleagues.
One of the ways is, I think, I always think that there's a lot to learn. So collaboration brings us closer. And so, for example, it's through mentorship, or it's bringing to attention that, look, there is some opportunity there, and I think that might be really good for you, for your future career aspiration, particularly for the new members of staff who might have just joined. I mean, when I say new members of staff, I'm new into academia. So I get to spend some time with them, and I think I'm really lucky to have my student as my colleague. So yeah, and I think there the dynamics change, and it was initially, I think it was a bit odd, because there was a bit of a, I mean, from the colleague's perspective, they were not sure. Okay, you are my lecturer. How do I? No, you're my colleague now. You're my colleague. Yeah, you are my colleague. And so that is the sort of, it's a very informal relationship that we have, and then also, so from my perspective, so I don't talk from a lecturer perspective, I talk from a colleague, more as a friend perspective, and I say, well, I'm genuinely interested in your development, and I think these are your strengths, and this is the opportunity, and I think you should give it a try. And then supporting them through the process, not just about advising them, or just not about saying, okay, there's an opportunity coming up, why don't you apply and see, it would be really good for what you think, the direction that you want to take. But it's also supporting them through the process. It also means giving them some feedback on the application, and in the process I learn, because there's a lot of learning for me as well. So I think it's a mutual learning process, and when I am in, for example, presenting in a conference, then I would do the same. I would probably run past the slides and presentations to them, and I think the hierarchy, there is no hierarchy between, I don't know, maybe less experience or more experience. It all breaks down, because I'm doing exactly the same when I have to go to a conference. I ask identical advice. So do you think I should be doing this? So it's about the, it's not about, it's about the confidence, level of confidence and informal conversations that we have, and through that, their staff development or career development.
If there are some indifferences among your colleagues, how do you handle it?
In what capacity?
In any capacity, if at all, if it arises. For some issues, some indifference arises.
So is that in?
Maybe with your subordinates?
You mean in your in the module, or?
No, you are a leader,
Yeah.
educational leader, so you'll be having your subordinates. If there are some indifferences with your subordinates, how do you handle it?
I think we don't view anyone as subordinates. We're all equal.
Okay, that's great.
So we're all equal. There are nobody.
does
Even
everyone-
if somebody were to come, even if somebody were to be reporting to me, he's not my subordinate. He is exactly, he or she is exactly the same as I am. I mean, it's that is not the that I don't tend to view them as subordinate, and in fact I don't have an autocratic style of the different leadership styles. You know, autocratic, bureaucratic, but I have I've got it here. I think it's
Transformative leadership.
Transformational
The
leadership,
second
where
was
I
transactional
get them,
transformation.
not transactional, but
Transformational.
transformational, where I give them the autonomy, and I am a great believer in autonomy, and so I give them the autonomy to make their decisions, but that also means they're accountable for it.
If it happens within the colleagues, how do you solve it?
Between the two,
Between any two colleagues, if there are some difference of opinions.
I think we have to take an objective look. So it is possible, and that's where we rely on the policies and processes, and why is the difference of opinion arising, and then we take an objective approach. So it's not about one colleague being right and the other being wrong. I think both the feedback and responses might be equally valuable, but maybe one of them might actually work contextually according to policies and processes. One of the examples is quite frequently in terms of the assessments, in terms of the curriculum development. Now, if there are any difference of opinion there, then we use the module handbook. So what's in the module handbook? And okay, what is your idea? I think listening is really important. So I listen to everyone, and then I go into the module handbook and I said, well, actually, member A's points align more closely with the module handbook, and I think it's fair to consider that. And I think member B's, so I think it's very, very important not to dismiss any view, because every view and every suggestion is valuable, but we are constrained in a sense that only one may be applicable, or we can only take some of them in the context that we are working. And then we discuss, then I discuss with member B on their ideas and see how that might be, how that can be incorporated, or areas where it can be incorporated. So member B is not discouraged or disheartened, or feels that, okay, my comment has got no value and why should I contribute, sort of thing. So I think from my perspective, I would always encourage, find ways of making things work rather than giving reasons as to why your idea cannot be worked. So and one of the best things that I do with everyone, including students, I do, well, of course, there are different leadership styles when it comes to students. Sometimes you have to be autocratic with the students because they need to know exactly what to be done, when to be submitted, etc. So there are different leadership styles. But in this scenario, in this circumstances, what I'll do is, okay, that's a good idea. If student comes up with it, that's a good idea. Go away, work on it. I'll leave them. Go away, work on it. They come back with a problem. Okay, these are the problems. So they come to me for so-called approval, or so-called idea of can we do this? I said, well, try it. And then they come back after some time and they say, well, actually, you know what? These are the issues that we encountered. How can we? Then it's the collective effort. We sit together, we talk and say, okay, I know what you're trying to do, but as you rightly identified, it's they who have identified this is an issue. And I think the way you need to go forward, and then I provide with some of the suggestions. So the entire process, there is no subordinate, there is no us versus them. It's all equal, and it's all valuing and respecting everyone's viewpoints.
No, as you said, there is two kinds of leadership. Let's forget about the first one. So transactional and transformational. So you are more into transformational leadership. That is what you follow, I understand from your interview. So when it comes to transactional, there's only two ways of looking at it. When people commit some mistake, they have to be punished in some kind of memos or something of that kind. And when they do something good, they have to be rewarded by giving them some appreciation awards and all. So if they commit some kind of an error, so how do you view that? So again, their transaction cannot be seen as transformational leadership. The moment you give them some punishment, that transactional leadership is no more called as transformational.
Yes. So we don't do that.
Okay.
I mean, I personally, I think we're all human.
Okay.
We all have family. We're all friends. We empathize with each other. So, and there are some genuine. It's possible for every one of us to make some genuine mistakes, and I think they shouldn't be punished. It does have an impact. I completely get that side of things, but then at the end of the day, I think. I think that transactional way of working might not be sustainable.
That's what leadership theory says.
Yeah,
that's not right.
It's not sustainable. So it's about just giving them the opportunities, providing them with opportunities, and allowing them to sort of reflect and and be more flexible in different ways of working. And I think a lot of things can be addressed. So I think, well, I personally don't believe in punishing.
Okay.
When
But
somebody
if
does,
again it repeats again, you will give them one more time of okay, forgive, and then do
Yeah.
it again. Okay.
yeah, I pose
That's exactly transactional. That is what the transactional leadership demands.
sorry, transformation.
Transformation.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
transformation.
So I wouldn't punish at all. And I think punish is a wrong. I think it's a bit of harsh terminology.
Yeah, I understand.
So yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Great. So you're a perfect leader. What do you want to teach other than software engineering? Your other areas of interest? Say for example, if I say you are an AI teacher or some problematic subjects you handle. So in that case, you cannot bring in so many interesting teaching pedagogies into your classroom. Like for example, dancing, singing, and all. So in that case, how do you go about with the subject?
I think it's different ways of thinking, critical thinking, and the ability to sort of relate. I think my inspiration is around and being aware of it. I can give one more example is students find database really boring. Particularly the relationship or the primary key, secondary key, and one-to-many, many-to-many relationship. And typically, you've got slides over there, and they say, okay, this is one-to-one, this is one-to-many, and they still get confused, and they don't try and contribute very little on that one. What I tend to do is the moment I start talking about relationship, as an example,
Okay.
they get exactly what one-to-one or one-to-many relationship is.
Okay.
So I think and that's where I think there's a bit of sense of humor, there's a bit of your side, and there's a bit of relating with they are in their teens. So I think talking to them in their language, like how many girlfriends, okay, boyfriends, okay, one or two, okay, one-to-one,
Okay.
one-to-many, okay. They don't forget it.
Okay.
They kind of get it. But the moment we start, I think that's my experience, that's what I found out. But the moment we start repeating ourselves in the academic language, that's where they struggle. That's where they try and say, okay, I get one-to-one, but it's still confusing. But the moment you try a different experience, different example from a real life situation that everybody can relate to, and link it to the topic, that's where you kind of break the ice. That's where they are able to understand it. And I think it's possible to do in any of the topics, including what is perceived as less interesting topics. For example, if we were to talk about security, it may be very difficult for them to visualize what digital security might look like. But the moment we start talking about locks and keys terminology, you have a house, yes. You've got a lock, yes. You've got a key, yes. Okay. Now let's translate it into what it means in terms of actual security that we're talking. Okay, this lock and key that I talked about is very similar to this. So I think it's just giving them parallel of examples that they can actually relate. And to do that, I think it's important to know the cultural context of the learners from where they come from. So I think so cultural context is important, and examples from day-to-day life that they can relate to is important.
Every faculty has a different capacity. So how do you delegate tasks between your faculty members?
I think we have a very, so we have a module leader and a module team, and it is all based on mutual understanding and mutual, well, as a module leader, I think I am accountable. And that's why I think it links back to your previous question of what if somebody does a mistake? That's fine.
Okay.
I'll take care, that's fine. I know why you've done it, I know what, okay, I'll defend it, that's fine, okay. But equally, there can be sometimes criticisms from the students about a particular member of staff within the module team. And that's sort of conversation is again not personal, because it's always possible that the student might have misperceived the intention of the member of staff, but it's also important for me to communicate that to the member of staff, so that member of staff is aware of the perception of the students. So it's not a personal conversation, it's a friendly conversation, bringing in what the student or the student views have got to, or how they perceive a particular member of staff. Quite often this comes to marking and feedback, and that's when I think we agree, okay, there are 100 scripts to mark, okay, it needs to be marked, they need to provide feedback, and then it needs to be moderated, and then it needs to be finalized. So we all do the marking equally. It's not that they do the marking, I do the moderation. It's all done equally distributed and equally empowered. So in the moderation process, so it's a very robust process that is followed, where every member of the module teaching team is equally involved.
So, very good, sir. So, I understand that you're a great leader. And finally, one last question. What are your strengths and weaknesses as a leader?
Okay, strengths and weaknesses. I think strengths is more, I think social constructivist and experiential learning probably I would see as my strength, ability to, and diversity as well. I'm a very, very great fan of diversity, equality, and that's inclusion, that side of aspect. So I tend to learn as much as I can from learners and different cultures, and I try to see how that can be implemented or incorporated in teaching. And in the process, I may also be able to understand my colleagues very well. I think in terms of my weaknesses, I should say that I'm lazy. In terms of, it's all there in the head, but it takes a while to come on the paper. So that's my weakness. I think that's yeah. I think and I think there's a lot to learn, and I don't know if it's a weakness, but I've been told by others maybe that's a weakness. Is I am a bit of a perfectionist in the sense that that I don't submit something unless I am convinced that it is up to a standard. But I've learned that it need not be the case. I mean, you can just do a draft and submit it and keep on working on it. But for some reason, I think I wouldn't submit the first draft until I'm convinced that okay, it's up to a reasonable level. So maybe that's my greater weakness, bigger weakness than the other one.
Too.
Yeah.
That's a strength.
Yeah, I mean it's a double-edged sword because the reason why it's weakness is because it wouldn't initiate any task. So whereas with the draft version I could have achieved something in 10 days, whereas with this one I wouldn't have sent anything in 10 days. So yeah, arguably it's both strength and weakness.
Thank you, sir. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
very much for your interview. It was a great learning for me. Thank you.